Hey everyone! Welcome to the second leg of our little side adventure in the Magdred Way. This quest offers a second copy of the Merchant Military and a steel sword, but more importantly, it presents one last chance to make our units qualify for intermediate classes before we go to Conan Tower. For whatever reason, the devs set both of the Chapter 5 battle quests in the same location, so this battle is very similar to the last one. The biggest difference is that most enemies are Myrmidons and not fighters, so they're weaker, but they're also faster. This time, Hilda and Ignatz are my adjutants. This will help them master their classes by the end of the next mission. Instead of following the turn-by-turn decision-making, I'm going to talk about bigger strategic concerns. I want to promote Byleth to Mercenary, Leone to Cavalier, and both Claude and Cyril to Archer, but there's a lot more to that story. I've mentioned before that I've been training Leone in axes and armor. The reason is that I want her to qualify for the Armored Knight class, too. In 3 houses, if a unit passes an exam for a new class, and any of their own stats, without factoring in the class bonuses they may have, are lower than the minimum stats for the new class, those stats are brought up to that minimum value. Players often notice this happening when they reach the advanced tier at level 20. Every advanced class has at least 12 defense minimum, and most have 8 or more res, so it's pretty common for physical units to gain some resistance, and for mages to get a few points of defense when they promote to their advanced classes. This can happen at every level though. You don't see much from the intermediate level because most beginner and intermediate class bases are only a tiny bit better than the stats your units come with at level 1. But there's one huge exception, the Armored Knight class. Armored Knights have that same 12 minimum defense you see from advanced classes, but they have it 10 levels earlier. 12 defense is a huge number for level 10. It's more than the expected value at that level for every student except Dedu. Even Raphael only averages 11. On top of that, whereas most other intermediate classes have 25 HP, the Armored Knight minimum is a whopping 30. The mages and the archer archetypes have very little hope of scratching that number with their first 9 levels. Adding all this together, intermediate steals can become the most powerful stat boosters in 3 houses. Even Claude, my lord, stands to gain 3 defense by qualifying for Armored Knight. Lysithea represents an extreme case. If she promotes to the class at level 10, she expects an additional 6 HP, 4 strength, and 8 defense beyond what just the mage class will give her. That's 18 stat points for a steal that costs 1,000 gold, and it makes Lysithea into a perfectly competent frontline fighter. That kind of yield is far, far better than the greenhouse. Yes, you'll eventually get those same minimum stats when you promote again at level 20, but this way you get them about 4 chapters early, and you accumulate more HP and defense points in the levels from 10 to 20. This isn't generally worth the while on something like an LTC run. There, only a tiny number of units will ever do battle, and those units have vanishingly few chances to work on their skill in combat. Everyone else only matters to the extent that they can rush for useful support abilities. But in a more casual setting, there is no bigger power boost available to you than the Armored Knight class. You can pass an exam with less than the listed qualifications, but your chance of doing so depends on the exact number of ranks you're short by, the number of different skills the class requires, and the level of the class in question. For all intermediate classes, you lose a uniform 40 percentage points for each rank you're missing. You gain back half your luck, which for a typical level 10 unit is about 4 or 5 points. So you can pass the Armored Knight exam with just D+ axes and D armor, or with C axes and E+ armor. Each of those give you about a 65% chance of success each time you try. With one less skill rank, you'd only have a 25% chance, and you're not even allowed to try if your number is less than 30. Now, I'm doing this pair of battles on the second weekend of Chapter 5 instead of the last one. Doing that lets me visit the new merchants before the month rolls over by exploring on the 3rd weekend. And that 3rd weekend has an important fishing event that I also don't want to miss. It just so happens that the week of lessons after this battle is the 9th such week in the game. Leone has had axes as a study goal from the very beginning, and 9 weeks on a neutral skill grant 180 points on Maddening, exactly enough to reach D+. She started armor in the last week of Chapter 3 so that she'd reach D in that skill at the same time. I planned that in advance because I knew I wanted her to be able to qualify right after this. There are 2 opportunities for certifications after this battle, one on the 3rd weekend of the month, and another on the day of the mission. With a 65% chance of success each time, Leone will have close to a 90% chance to pass on her 2 tries. She has the requirements for Cavalier in full, so she's guaranteed to pass that exam on whichever weekend she doesn't take the Armored Knight one. Claude has been doing almost the same thing, except that I spent time tutoring him directly in axes to unlock his budding talent. With that, he has C axes already, and he'll reach D armor with his studies this week, so he's guaranteed to pass both the Armor Knight and the Archer exams. Cyril's in the same boat. He comes with C axes, so just by studying armor for 2 weeks, he can get to the minimum E+ rank. Or, if you set him on the weeding group task, you tutor him in armor immediately, and you make sure to earn C support with him right after you recruit him, so that his motivation will refill after the first round of tutoring, you can teach him again and push him all the way to D. All this means that reaching level 10 right now doesn't just give Claude, Leonie, and Cyril useful new classes. It also makes them far tougher than they ought to be, just in time for a difficult mission. But I'm actually doing this for everybody. Every single one of my units has been working on their axe rank since early in Chapter 3. Except for Raphael, who comes with D armor at base, and Hilda, who got direct armor tutoring to get her own budding talent, they all added armor as a goal in the first or second week of Chapter 4. By starting axes 4 weeks before armor, I'm timing things so that a unit neutral to both skills will get D+ axes and D armor by the second weekend of Chapter 6. I'm aiming for that date because it gives me 3 chances in a row to attempt the exam before the Chapter 6 mission. 3 consecutive tries almost guarantee success. Only Marianne and Lysithea have to contend with weaknesses in one or both areas. When you're tutoring directly and you don't have statues or professor expertise helping you, weaknesses are horrible. But with study goals, a weakness will grow by 16 points, whereas a strength will gain 24. So you get 2/3 of the efficiency with a weakness, which is still pretty respectable. Compare Marianne, who has an armor weakness, with Lawrence, who doesn't. Lawrence gets 100 points for D armor in 5 weeks. I purchased the armor +2 bonus from Index Statue, so Marianne can get her 100 points with just 1 extra week of study and 1 single instance of armor tutoring. Lysithea has weaknesses in both axes and armor, so she has to start armor early like Marianne, but she also falls short by 36 points if she only studies axes for 9 weeks. You can cover most of that by starting axes 2 weeks earlier, or you can do what I'm going to do, which is to use the sauna to help Byleth teach her those 36 points. All of this does have an opportunity cost, of course. I won't have any real trouble reaching the requirements for the intermediate classes I actually want to use, but this does delay the things you can get from higher skill ranks. Most notably, Lysithea won't have Warp in time for the upcoming mission, and she's not going to have Darkspike's Tau in time for the mission in Chapter 6 either. And I'll usually be attempting my advanced exams with something less than 100% chance of passing. The other cost is in money. I have purchased all 3 intermediate seals from the shop every month. I've done that because I'm going to have 14 units who all want real intermediate classes and armor promotions, and that takes a lot of seals. Before Chapter 8, when you're allowed to buy them in unlimited quantities, you can get 9 intermediate seals from other sources, but the rest have to come from the shop, where you can only buy 3 each month. I'm prepared to accept those costs. In Fire Emblem and most similar games, it's usually better to go ahead and earn a big early game boost than to worry too much about what's coming down the line much later on. Of course, with this series I'm doing my best to have my cake and eat it too. I'm trying to optimize so that I can still get those late game goodies. The sacrifice I'm making is over the next couple of chapters, where I'm opting for 12 concrete points of defense over breaker skills and certain utility spells. That brings me to what I'm doing with Byleth. With the advent of the sauna this month, I'm spending more of my activity points on faculty training, focusing on reason, armor, and riding. I really can't spare the time for him to learn axes, so he's the one unit who isn't pursuing that strategy. Reason is obviously necessary for the magic build I'm going for. Armor and riding are mainly for recruitment, although the armor training also helps Byleth teach the armor skill to others. Since I'm learning armor anyway, I'm going to train all the way to C rank to grab weight -3. In most cases, weight -3 represents a straight increase of 3 AS, which is a pretty good bonus. If it lets you carry a heavier weapon than you otherwise would, you can think of it as adding strength instead of speed. With all my other units going to D armor anyway, it makes sense for Byleth to use the statue bonus and his expertise to train most of my units up to C in turn. So in the next couple of chapters, all my physical units will eventually sport weight -3 themselves. For faculty training, I am soft resetting for great results, which give you 50% more points rounded up. This is a thing that you can easily control just by saving before each session, although you'll end up spending a couple extra minutes sometimes. If you really hate the tedium, I want you to know that now that we've already reached B rank, it's not that important to have hyper-optimized monastery activities. I'm doing a lot of tournaments, but that's as much for the money as for the professor XP. You see, I'm budgeting by assuming that I never get a perfect result from group tasks. That's a chance for 500 gold each week that I'm not accounting for, simply because it's far too annoying to aim for a few good tutoring results and to care about the group task outcome at the same time. So if you drop a tournament for an extra faculty training each week from here on out, the worst that'll happen is that you'll delay B+ and A rank by a week. So you'll lose a couple of activity points and a couple of teaching sessions, but you're still going to hit A+ rank at the exact same time, during the Fistfuls of Fish event in Chapter 9. It is possible to get A+ Professor rank in Chapter 8, but doing that requires you either to sacrifice a lot of faculty training, or to get really absurd results from fishing. For example, there's a point where you'd have to use 15 herring bait on a Fish of Mystery day, and get a goddess messenger from every single one of them. That's a bridge too far, even for me. Especially because early A+ means exactly one more battle on one weekend, and you have plenty of time to do all the quests and paralogs in Part 1 without it. To understand the other ways in which I'm using the monastery to the fullest, we have to discuss the motivation mechanic. The game teaches you pretty quickly that you can motivate your students by sharing meals with them, giving them gifts, and returning their lost items. What it doesn't tell you is that whenever a student asks to have a conversation with you, if you agree to do it immediately, the conversation will completely refill that student's motivation. The earliest support ranks come pretty quickly because C, C+, and B only require 100 points each. When I'm going around the monastery, it's pretty common for me to motivate someone with a meal or some gifts, only to find afterward that I've also unlocked a support conversation. Whenever that happens, if I'm going to be teaching the following Monday, I avoid the little conversation marker that appears on the map like the plague. In those situations, I always make sure to teach the student whose support I'm about to unlock. That drains their motivation, but during the week, they'll come to me for the conversation, which will instantly replenish it. You can save quite a few meals and gifts by doing this. Another way to do that is to decide exactly which students you're going to teach next Monday and only motivate them. You're only ever going to teach up to 7 students in 1 week, so you only have to motivate more students than that if you're going to battle before a second set of lessons. And there's essentially no reason to motivate anyone on weekends that don't have lessons afterward. Usually that's when a mission is coming up, and MVPs on missions and paralogs get their motivation completely restored. The exception is at the end of Chapter 7, because the first lessons in Chapter 8 happen before the first free weekend. Instead of immediately returning lost items to your students, you should hold on to them until you can use the motivation boost. If I have someone's lost item on hand and I have a gift that they like, I know that I can motivate them completely without having a meal with them. Conversely, if I don't have 2 things to give someone, a meal is my only option to get them back to full, and there's no point half motivating them with a single item before we have that meal. When I'm following these principles, I don't have to do that many meals. I can use that time instead for cooking, choir practice, training, or tournaments depending on my needs. The greenhouse is another key element of my overall strategy. If you take away just one thing from all this, I want it to be that if you're smart about using meals and gifts and supports, you don't need flowers for a long time. Growing flowers is a lot more expensive than most people realize, since flowers don't ever grow themselves. Suppose you want to get speed boosters with your flowers. Then you have to plant pale blue flower seeds, and aside from the handful of random drops from blue glowing spots around the monastery, the only way you're getting more of those seeds is by buying them. That money adds up, so much that it's usually cheaper to just buy all of the 100 and 300 gold gifts from the merchants and use those. The best things to plant early on are the 4 and 5 star seeds: Angelica, Boa Fruit, Morphus Plum, and Nord Salad. These have a couple of great features. For one, the number of professor experience points you get when you harvest your crops depends on the average quality of the seeds you used. If you plant only 5-star seeds, no matter how many you plant, you get 500 points. The 4-star seeds are worth 400. The extra 100 or 200 professor XP each week compared to flower seeds really adds up. For 2, at yield levels 1 and 2, these high quality seeds grow themselves. If you plant a single one of these seeds, you can get 2 or 3 back. You can also get useful crops with these things. The namesake crops are all worth a good amount of money when sold, and Nord Salad and Angelica seeds are the only way to get Magdred Kirsch early. I explained previously that the meal Deified Fish requires a Magdred Kirsch and a Goddess Messenger, and in return you get both a great set of stat boosts and a huge chunk of Professor XP. You can only get your first copy of these seeds from a single random drop location. There's a set of barrels southeast of the main hall, next to the tea area. They have a blue glow that always provides one of the 4 seeds. You can save in front of it and soft reset to get the one you want. I would say that's the one and only random drop that's truly game-changing. The 2 best high-quality seeds are Angelica and Nord Salad, which give strength and speed boosters respectively. That one glowing spot appears in both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, so I always make sure to get one of each right at the beginning of the game. Then I plant either Angelica or Nord Salad seeds all the way through Chapter 8. It's mainly Nord Salad. Just one Nord Salad seed with pruning, the 500 gold cultivation option, yields a speed carrot 46% of the time, and it also constantly gives me Magdred Kirsches to cook, and Nord Salad to sell, and more Nord salad seeds. Last we come to fishing. A little bit of fishing helped me rush the first few professor ranks, and it gave me a bunch of bullhead and Tutatis pike to cook. And I used the 2 herring bait I'd found at the monastery to get 2 goddess messengers in chapter 3. But this month is the biggest fishing month so far. The first weekend in chapter 5 has the very first fistfuls of fish event, when you can pull out 2 to 4 fish with each bait. If you have 10 bait on hand, spending them all can get you a solid 600 professor XP. The weekend after this one has the second Fish of Mystery Day, and because I've done the merchant quest, I'll be able to buy 5 more herring bait to use on that. That means up to 5 more goddess messengers, so 500 professor XP just from catching them, and then another 2,250 points from cooking deified fish another 5 times. Once the merchants arrive, I will buy all the bait from them every month. I'll use some of that bait to get extra money and professor experience along the way, but I'll be saving most of it for the next Fish of Mystery and Fistfuls of Fish events. I think that about covers everything. I'll get all those promotions, and then I'll see you at the next mission, the Spiral Slog. Please subscribe, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below.